gatherings, this gentleman walked up to our table and he says, "Mr. Gentry, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in one of your classes and I'm a football player on one of your teams, and it's because of you that what I am today." He said, "I am grateful to you." Now this is the kind of gentleman Jimmy is. Now, this is a very interesting story. Back in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, I was working for American Airlines at Los Angeles. And a very good friend of mine was from Tennessee, and we became really close. And when we retired, he retired out to Mount Juliet and myself in Franklin. Last year I get a phone call, and he said, "Bob, you remember a guy named Jimmy Gentry, how he used to talk about his father in World War II, and how he, in Dachau, he was one of the first soldiers to liberate it." He says, I said, "Yeah, I remember him." He said, "Well, do you know a guy named Jim Gentry?" "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, occasionally I have lunch with him." Well, the German government made a documentary in German and in English. And they were looking for the American soldiers that liberated. And there was this soldier named Gillespie and another one named Jim Gentry. They had the survivors from the concentration camp at Dachau, and they brought them over to Mr. Gillespie's home, which happened to live in Redondo Beach. And in this documentary, and it's fabulous, it's a great documentary, and it showed Jimmy Gentry, and part of, we'll see it on this video, but this documentary was sent to me via email, but I cannot give it to anyone. I can show it until they make arrangements with the History Channel that they can broadcast this thing. So maybe sometime in the future we could show this. It would have to be in segments because it's a little bit over an hour. And the incredible part of this here story is that this Mr. Gillespie just died 3 weeks ago. So we're looking at the last American survivor that liberated Dachau, Jim Gentry.
In December 1941, life in Franklin, Tennessee and around the world changed forever when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States was fully drawn into World War II, and the war effort reached deeply into towns such as Franklin.
World War II was a war that was romantic, it was sad, it was exciting, it had everything in it. And everybody was in the war. Everybody was involved in World War II. My brother was killed at Minturno Bridges in Italy, April the 29th, 1943. My mother had put up a blue star in the window, as all mothers did back then for their sons or their husbands, whoever it might be. I never saw her cry but that once when his word came that he was killed. I was 17 and soon would turn 18 that fall, and by this time it's time for me to go, and she puts up another blue star for me before I go in. She was the strong lady, but not that strong to see one son killed and then another one go away. And I really don't know. I was gone away for just under 2 years. So I really don't know what went through her mind during that time. But I feel like she was doing a lot of praying at that time too.
Can you imagine at age 17, getting on a boat and going across that big body of water, having never been away from your mama at all. Had never been to Davidson County before. And then going through the Battle of the Bulge and having the experiences he had.
I think the war had an amazing effect on him, and it opened his eyes not only to another world, but to terror, to the war experience, to hatred. Things that he had never even thought of before were all of a sudden in his face.
As the war drew toward a close, Gentry was fighting alongside Allied troops in Germany, several kilometers outside Munich. With no forewarning, Gentry would experience an aspect of World War II that would stay with him the rest of his life.
My feelings, as I reminisce back to that date, April 29, 1945, 19 years old, you felt like that you had seen it all. You had seen death, which you could associate with war, of course. I remember there was a hillside, not a steep hill, but a gradual slope going into this little village, not knowing what it was at all, but there was a wall, obviously some sort of camp, and boxcars, cattle cars, if you will.
His commanding officer, he was staff sergeant by then, ordered him to lead his squad down to the boxcars and check them out. And you know, they didn't know if there were still Germans in there, enemy snipers, whatever.
We go down, and as we go down, there's a terrible smell. I don't know exactly what it was. I know we talked about maybe it was Germans using gas for the first time, you know, to salvage the war. Something just crossed our mind. And then when we entered the camp around the boxcars, that's the cars that were carrying literally hundreds of dead bodies. Now, we didn't understand that, and I remember my first reaction was, who are these people? And because they didn't have on uniforms, they had on striped clothes. A friend of mine said that they're Jews.
Gentry was among the first British and American forces to enter Dachau, the infamous German concentration camp.
And then they go on further inside the compound, and there's a moat and barbed wire, and on the other side, the inner part of the compound, is where the prisoners were. And his first experience was what he calls the sea of faces. He said it was the living dead peering through these barbed wire fences on the other side of the moat. And he said these people were dead, but they were standing up and still living. But how they were living, I don't know. A lot of them did die.
Those eyes still stay with me even today. I can still see the eyes. I didn't really understand what I was seeing at that time. They were prisoners, but I didn't know what kind of prisoners. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything about their family or anything like that.
The American foot soldier really didn't know what a concentration camp was. Some of the higher-ups did, but it wasn't passed along.
Some of those prisoners, when they came out, would hug and kiss you, and most of them would fall down on their knees and kiss your legs and kiss your boots. We stayed there all that day and spent the night in a barrack that the German guards had used. And I remember the next day going into the commandant's office, which was near the front gate, and his door was locked. We broke the door open. He goes in, nice office, and in his closet just to the left as you go in the door, opened it, and up above, I happened to just glance up and see something on the shelf above. It was his pistol. The next day, they decided that we would move on. The doctors and nurses and the Red Cross, all those people came in to administer to the prisoners, and so they took us out in this big field and took all of our clothes off and burned all of our clothes and sprayed us with DDT. Then they gave us fresh clothes, and we moved on from there. James C. Gentry 4404670. T44, blood type O. That's my dog tag. It has a notch in it, and you know what that notch is for. I shouldn't say that, but that's when your buddy goes down, you put that notch between his two teeth, inside the teeth, and you tap it in. That stays with the body. You take the second dog tag home to send home a telegram notifying the next of kin he's been killed. I didn't mean to get into that quickly, but that's what that dog tag, that notch in the dog tag's for, is to go between the two incisor teeth. And Sergeant Randy McDavid was with me, and I shouldn't be doing this.
Jimmy,
He's as close as he is to me, and we're talking, and then in a second he's dead.
Jimmy, tell us how the prisoners knew exactly what time you'd be
All right.
at the camp.
Yeah, we didn't know where we were even going. See, the infantry, they don't tell you anything. You just go. And so we were infantry, and we walked. In fact, I've walked from Le Havre, France to Czechoslovakia. It wasn't on a trip. That's how far we traveled through there. Anyway, what he's talking about is the prisoners could do this. In Dachau, they could hear the bombings in Munich. It was close to Munich, close enough. And they knew that if they were bombing in Munich, the Americans were not in Munich. They wouldn't be bombing themselves. Said one day, this prisoner's telling me this, said one day the bombing stopped in Munich. He said, uh-oh, the Americans are in Munich because they stopped bombing. And then artillery shells travel 3 to 5 miles, and they shoot over the infantry, that's us. And said one day, the shells quit falling, we knew you'd be opening the gates in 30 minutes. See, they knew that by being in there all that time. So they're inside of a wall, inside of another wall. And so that's how they kept up with the outside, by things that happening around them and all that sort of thing. But let me answer some questions for you, whatever you want to do.
Jimmy, approaching Dachau, were you unopposed? Was any around there?
Well, at that time of the war, in other words, it's a football game, it's the fourth quarter. We're ahead by 5 touchdowns and just 2 minutes left on the clock.
Okay.
Game was nearly over. We were moving fast. The Germans were surrendering. About as many German soldiers with their hands on their heads coming towards us as ahead of us. War was nearly over then when we were there, April 29th, 1945, about 10 o'clock in the morning.
First picture I saw of you, it looked like your shoulder patch was 106th Infantry Division.
No, I was in the 42nd Infantry. 42nd. Rainbow Division. 42nd Division. 101st was there near us, I know that, I remember seeing them. 45th was there also.
Did you go in with the division, or you were?
No, I was a replacement later. They'd already landed and moved into France before I got there.
Where'd you join?
Just north of Paris before I got in.
Jimmy, do you have any idea how many prisoners there were the day you got there?
No, I've heard numbers though. I've heard into the thousands. I couldn't quote that because and it's true, there was thousands of them there. When you walk in between the barracks and into the camp there, you're stepping over dead bodies. They just starved just laying in the street. And I didn't understand. I might add this for you. Let me go back to my childhood a little bit. When I was growing up, we mainly ate rabbit, squirrels, and fish. We were hunters all the time. This is during the Great Depression. But I learned to do something that I'll come back, believe it or not, come back to what I'm talking about. I learned to trap animals. And because in those days, furs were expensive. They brought good money. So I learned to trap muskrat and mink and sell them to a man in Franklin by the name of Mr. Martin Torner. Mr. Torner was one of only 4 Jewish people that lived in Franklin, Tennessee at that time. You catching on? And he would buy my fur. He was a good man. And when we got to that camp and saw all these dead bodies, and I didn't know who they were, and I asked, who are these people? They said, they're Jews. I thought of Mr. Torner back home that used to buy my furs. That's how close it is to you when you get in that situation like that. So we saw thousands of dead bodies, They had a oven in there that, well, they were stacked up like wood, just bodies, and just throw them in and burn them. And I might add this, had we not gotten there when we did, I wouldn't be telling this story, because they would have burned all the bodies before we got there. We got there before they burned the bodies. They'd already burned them by the thousands, but when we got there were still piles of bodies. Just this room here couldn't hold half the bodies, ready to be going to the ovens. And if we'd been, like say, a couple of days later, they'd burned those, and I wouldn't be telling this story. Some question?
Coach, when you got there, was any of the camp staff still there?
Yes, but dead. The prisoners beat them to death with slats, bed slats, and we killed some of them. We killed some of them.
Jimmy, tell me.
Most of them had run away, though. Most of them had run away.
Tell them the story about how you started talking about this. You didn't talk
Well, okay. Well, let's see how I want to do that. I get a phone call 40 years later, after the war. Little lady in Nashville called me and said, "Are you James C. Gentry?" That's my name. I said, "Yes, ma'am. I don't know what you want." And she said, "Were you in the Army during World War II?" "Yes, ma'am." "Were you in the 42nd Division?" "Yes, ma'am." I thought she was going to ask me about somebody that I was with. She said, "Were you in E Company?" Now, she nailed it down pretty close. And I said, "Yes, ma'am." Then she says back to me, "Then you were at Dachau." She knew that. And she's the one that said, "I want you to come to Nashville and talk about it." I wouldn't do it. And so about 2 weeks later, I get another phone call. This is the one you're referring to, I think. I get another phone call, and this time it was a man's voice, and I could tell from his delivery that he was from somewhere in Eastern Europe. And he began by saying, "I understand you don't want to talk about your war experiences." And I said, "That's right." And he said, "I just want to come out and shake your hand." Well, you can't turn a fellow down for wanting to shake your hand. So I said, "Well, I'll be out on the football field that afternoon." And so sure enough, I see a car pull up and somebody brought the old man out. I say that respectfully now. The old man gets out. He can barely walk. And he comes across the field, comes right straight to me. And when he got about where you are, there, about 10, 15 feet from me, I broke down and cried. I recognized him. He was one of them. Not only one of them, but something happened. And he came over, he cried, we cried together. And he's the one that said to me eventually after we talked, "You have got to talk. If you don't talk, they'll say it didn't happen." And I didn't really realize that he was telling the truth then, because that would have happened. But I actually was there, saw it and smelled it and touched it. So I started talking after that, but he's the one. Now, a movie producer heard me tell that little story right there about him, and he caught on right away. He said, "Why did you cry?" And when I saw him that day, and why I cried was this. It's going to be a little bit hard for you to understand, I suppose. In those days, the thing to do was smoke cigarettes. During the Great Depression years and 40s, oh God, I've never had a cigarette in my mouth in my life. But everybody else did. My brother smoked, my daddy smoked, my friends smoked. They gave me a carton of cigarettes, I'd give them away. The Army furnished me with cigarettes. And you give them away. Cigarettes were worth more than anything else. And that day that we went to the camp, not knowing what we were about to find, that man, quote, that man came to the fence. I'll do it for you. He came to the fence. And of all the people in the United States Army, I mean, that was were there, but guess who he asked for a cigarette? "Haben Sie Zigaretten?" And I said, "Ich nicht haben, I don't have any." He said, "Einen Moment bitte, just a minute, please." And he goes away and barely walking. I thought, what's that old man doing? He's going away. And in a few minutes, I see him coming back, and he's got a little box about this big square. He cleaned it with his hand. Whatever he has been buried. He's getting the dirt off of it. And he comes to the fence and opens the box and hands it through to me. And inside was 5 or 6 cigarette butts that he had saved. He gave me all he had. It reminded me in the Bible of the lady that gave all she had, just the coin, 2 coins. That's all she had. That's the man. And he had come to Nashville in the Holocaust Commission, knew about me, and he stopped there, traveling And they told him about a man that was in a camp down there, and he found that out, and he said, well, I want to see him. And so they told me how to find me. In fact, they drove him out there, the Holocaust Commission did. And that's how he found me. He was the same man that asked me that day for the cigarettes. How many cigarettes?
Tell them about the picture the size of a postage stamp.
Pardon me?
The postage stamp, the picture that the boy recognized.
Oh yeah, a little. They're about that size.
Yeah.
The guys that I think I know what you're talking about. So many things that happened in my life. I can't keep up with everything, but that's what we show to identify ourselves. Is that what you're talking about? Which one?
No, the DVD that you saw with the woman with the son that came through and saw the picture.
Pointed out the picture of the father.
Oh yes, yeah. That happened many years. I got the wrong eras there. Yeah, we had the farm open. It's been 8 or 10 years now, maybe not that long. But anyway, I had a DVD, and you're just seeing a little bit of it. A DVD, and on the back of that DVD are 4 snapshots about the size of a postage stamp. And one of them of the men in the concentration camp with the striped clothes on. And we had it open for the pumpkin patches we have out at the farm. And I had one left on the table. I sold all I had but one. It was laying on the table. And a little boy comes up. He's 6 years old. And his mother, but the mother comes on by, and the little boy stops and sees that DVD, and he said, look, Mama, DVD. And she said, oh, yeah, honey, she's way up here by me now. And he turns it over, and he sees the picture on there of the men in the concentration camp with striped clothes on, a little picture about that big. And he picked on it with his finger. Said, who are they? And the man was talking to me. He looked down and said, oh, that's the concentration camp he was in, pointed to me. And when he did, the mother stopped. She said, which camp are you in? I said, Dachau. She came back and said, that's my daddy. And I thought, no, that couldn't be. That couldn't be. That couldn't be. She started talking. She sat down. She cried. She talked. And then finally she said these words. That's all he talks about. I said, is he still living? She said, yes. He lives in Arizona. She's a flight attendant. She had him flown over here, and we met face to face. And he's the one that told me how they knew we're coming in. He's the one that said we could hear the bombings, we could do this, we could do that. He's the one that told me how that happened. And he came over, we met face to face. He was from the Ukraine. He was not Jewish. They kill those as fast as they get them. And so he was from the Ukraine. And his daughter then, we become good friends. I may see her next week. I don't know. She comes by once in a while now. But that's how that happened. Was that little boy seeing those men with striped clothes on and said, who are they? And that's how that stuff that happened. You got a question for me? We could talk for a long time.
Coach, have you ever run into somebody who tried to deny the Holocaust or challenge?
I did it. I'll do it this way for you. The first talk, I went 40 years and did not talk. Made the first talk at Vanderbilt. You know where that is? Pretty close. And when I finished that day, I asked a question, and a young man got up and said, don't you think what you saw might have been a hoax? It really didn't happen like that. And I'm the one who just got through telling him what I had seen. And that was that guy was questioning me that I didn't see it, I didn't smell it, I didn't touch it, see all that sort of thing. So yes, I've had that to happen. And there's probably some still try to deny it. But it is absolutely the truth. I mean, I've touched them, I've smelled them, I've been with them, I've seen them, I know all about that.
Did you convince that guy?
I don't know. I think when I said that back to him, I think the crowd clapped.
Okay.
Sort of for him, putting him down what they were doing. Question, do that.
Yeah. Were troops going into Auschwitz and other camps at the same time you were?
I suppose. Well, we didn't. I was the infantry. We didn't care what anybody else was doing. We were looking out for ourselves. Yeah. we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know where we were. I didn't know the word Dachau. I didn't know what I was. Anything about it.
Auschwitz is in Poland.
Yeah. But
where'd you end up when the war was over?
Czechoslovakian border, going into Czechoslovakia. On the Salzach River. I can tell you exactly where I was and tell you what I did. I went down. See, I've skipped about 10 hours of story here. That day we were going in and the word came, the Germans have surrendered. We were on the Salzach River going into Czechoslovakia. I walked down by the river in the field and got down on my knees and prayed and thanked God for taking care of me. That's what I asked when I went into combat. Please take care of me. It's all I prayed for. So that's what happened to me. Other questions, other questions.
How did you know that the fellows that were left in the camp were not Jews? How did you learn that?
Well, by the way they talked, and the Jews, if we knew them, we didn't know anything about it at that time. I say anything about it. We didn't know that they were killing the Jews as fast as they could before we got there. We found that out after we got there. They had them piled up just like a stack of wood, and they were the Jews. They had numbers on the arm, inside the arm, right there. They had numbers on. That's the Jews.
And the Ukrainians?
They were, in other words, they were marked right where you put your fingers, where they marked, tattooed on there, the numbers.
And the Ukrainian guys did not have numbers?
They didn't have them. No. Right, his name was Oleg Rudenko. Oleg Rudenko. Other questions? Now let me say this. That, and then I'll stop. You got plenty of time here for me to stop here a little bit. When you're in the infantry, I'm partial to the infantry because you can't get any lower. And at that time, I didn't want to be in the infantry. I wanted to be in the Air Force. But they didn't need anybody in the Air Force. They said, we need foot soldiers, and that's how I ended up in the infantry. So I know what a bullet sounds like when it goes by your ear. I know what a bullet feels when it hits you. I know all that's the infantry. I know how we go from one place to the other. We walk, or we crawl, or we whatever, and we sleep. I went to sleep walking once. Guess what? When I hit the ground, it'll wake you up every time. You get up and keep going. So I'm partial to the infantry. We could talk forever. We could talk forever.
Well, we all admire you, and we appreciate you coming down here and sharing with us. And not only did you have an interesting military life and got to do some things that nobody else, can claim, but your life as a coach, you've impacted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young men at Franklin and Brentwood Academy and BGA. And so
Franklin High School.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's all right. Thank you anyway.